Yeah,
All
good.
right, I think we're ready to get started.
Awesome. Did you want us to, well, after I introduce him, do you want us to mute Ashley?
I can mute you, yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, so our presenter today, his name is Neil. He's one of our undergraduate students that is a part of the alcohol use behavioral phenotyping Bath Connections class. He joined the team just this past September, and he's going to be presenting the poster that they worked on for the Mary Ann Blackwood conference. I believe it's in presentation style now, though, so not just a poster. But yeah, so welcome, Neil, and whenever you're ready, you can share your screen.
Hi, like Paige introduced, I'm Neil. I'm a sophomore who joined this year, and yeah, I'll just be presenting essentially what we presented over at the Marianne Black conference, along with a few updates. Let me share my screen. All right, hopefully you can see that.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, yeah, so I'll be presenting predicting alcohol use disorder through games, alcohol use, and behavior phenotyping tests. Just a little background to get started. As you know, AUD is a global health concern affecting nearly 30 million individuals worldwide. And one of the issues we sought to address was that tools used for AUD screening are developed in high-income countries. So culturally, psychometric, and validated tools were needed for low resource settings, both in and outside the US. And this is like kind of one of the primary focuses behind the AUBPT tool. The alcohol use and behavioral phenotyping test uses the research domain criteria to create a culturally adaptive computerized test with gamified tasks that assess psychological traits linked to alcohol use. So as for the research domain criteria, it's outlined by the National Institute of Mental Health as a set of principles for investigating mental disorders. And it facilitates a comprehensive understanding of AUD by examining how disruptions across domains contribute to the disorder. With our AUBPT tool specifically, we focus on 3 domains, and these are the negative valence, positive valence, and cognitive systems domains. Within these domains, there are some specific constructs that our tool highlights. Under negative valence, we focus on the potential threat construct, which examines the amount of time taken in between receiving a stimulus and making a choice. Under positive valence, we focus on the reward valuation construct with the reward delay effort subconstruct to see how the perceived value of a reward changes over time. Under cognitive systems, we focus on the cognitive control construct. One subconstruct of focus is the response selection subconstruct, which just examines the control of a planned movement in response to a contradictory signal. We also focus on the inhibition suppression subconstruct, which focuses on risk-taking and risk-aversive behavior. Overall, the negative valence domain is represented by the stop signal and balloon analog risk tasks. Positive valence is represented by the money selection delay discounting task, and cognitive systems is represented by the stop signal and balloon analog risk tasks. So this is just a quick graphic overview of the domains, and the 3 that we focus on are they have an asterisk next to them. So our project aims. Our first aim is to develop, adapt, and test feasibility of AUBPT in culturally and lingually different settings through content validation and pilot data collection. Second is to psychometrically validate AUBPT task-based paradigms for assessment of behaviors with implications for alcohol use and addiction. Third is to test the clinical validity and utility of AUBPT with existing mental health and alcohol use clinical scales across different clinical settings. And our secondary aim is to evaluate the implementation characteristics of AUBPT in low and middle income country clinical research settings to assess like feasibility and best practices. So as for our methods, as mentioned above, these are the RDoC domains, constructs, and subconstructs that we're focused on in each task. We're currently collecting data both online via mTurk and Prolific and in person in Durham, Brazil, Tanzania, and India. And this data collection process involves an extensive screening process in which the patients answer a series of surveys, including the audit, PHQ-9, GAD-7, drink, and more. As for the data analysis itself, this has been kind of a more ongoing process. During the fall semester of 2024, so last semester, we spent a good deal of time learning how some common data analysis methods worked, and we started developing some templates in R for future use. Some of these included confirmatory factor analysis, exploratory factor analysis, the Roche model, and a few more. And starting in this semester, starting more fall semester and continuing through this semester, we have been like perusing some of the existing literature on like these sorts of tools, and we were identifying the analysis methodologies best suited to each individual AUBPT task. So we essentially split into teams focusing on BART, which is the balloon analog risk task, delay discounting, and stop signal. And we perused existing literature to identify the metrics and the data analysis methodologies that were most commonly used. We're currently working on reconciling these identified metrics and like, I guess, data analysis tools with the ones that we have looked into to identify the most promising ones for our own analysis. And this is just some of the screenshots that we included in our poster for each of the tasks. Yeah. So as of now, we can definitively say we have developed a proof of concept AUBPT model, including designing 3 behavioral tasks and integrating tasks into a digital web-based platform built on the React framework with Firebase integration. To address country partner needs, we have added offline functionality, task trials, and improved Portuguese and Swahili translations by working with our collaborators. To date, we have 20 pilot participants and have completed 10 qualitative interviews to assess initial feasibility of AUBPT, and preliminary data from Brazil demonstrates AUBPT's like feasibility as a digital screening tool. So these are some next steps. The first 3 represent like the ones that we presented at the conference, and the 4th one is a more recent development. So we will be conducting the data analysis in India and North Carolina. We are aiming to complete Tanzania and Brazil pilot data analysis, and we are continuing with drafting the pilot manuscripts for Tanzania and Brazil. The new next step, which seems to be the most prioritized at this time, is integrating feedback from online and in-person data collection. We've recently been receiving some critical feedback regarding AUBPT's like tasks functionalities that we will be integrating to enhance the tool and make sure it's clear for all of the participants involved. The first one is some online participants reported running into some crashes, which was an error that we had not encountered at all previously. So this may be something we need to look into, like in terms of edge cases and stuff that has not been accounted for. Additionally, we heard from an in-person data collection trial that some of the instructions for the balloon analog risk task were confusing, resulting in the task being performed incorrectly. Even though we were giving like feedback and trying to help better understand it, we just found that this has been a significant issue, something that we also thought might need some editing. So as of now, addressing both of these points of feedback are currently the primary prioritized next steps. It's just this is our translation and adaptation. And yeah, that's what I have for now. Thank you.
Really cool. Thanks, Neil.
Thank you.
You guys can, yeah, thanks. The room over there is still muted. So if folks have questions they can share online. Feel free to unmute yourself or drop in the chat. That was a really great summary. I know that most everybody in here has heard us mention AUBPT, which sounds like alphabet soup, and a lot of folks haven't seen these details, so that's really great. I wanted to just have a plug. I am scheduled to present tomorrow to our data science, our methodology and data science group in the morning on scale development and validation. So some of the things that you're talking about, if they're interesting to folks in a general sense, should come tomorrow to learn a little bit about that. I wonder if you, Paige, or anybody else who's involved in the project wants to comment a little further on some of the things. Maybe they didn't. I was going to say maybe they surprised you coming out of this, or just that you just were completely unexpected when you guys set out. You mentioned some of the challenges that came up, and some of them are easier to address than others. But I wonder if you can mention a couple of things to highlight, some of those pitfalls that happen in global health research that we just have to figure out as we go.
Yeah, I think one thing that I was definitely surprised by is kind of how when we're designing it, we like take certain things to be like obvious. Like for example, I think one of the ones that was most surprising to me was that even though we included a box for entering our RedCap ID to make sure like we can keep track of the data, it's even though it's like listed in the instructions for people doing the task online, it still seems like almost none of them are like following with that part. So that just means we need to make sure we're not just taking it as an assumption, and we're more clearly highlighting it, maybe changing the way our tool itself looks to emphasize that this is a required portion.
Yeah, I guess I can also add a little more context. So we have been working in like the 4 different study sites, and something that we've noticed is that translations are really difficult and it often depends on who you have doing the translations for you. So even if you have like a group of people that do the original translations, when you go back to it a couple months later, there are always changes that are requested, especially when you're like working with different populations. So if you have researchers doing the translation, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're translating it into like lay translations for like the general population that will actually be using your app in our case. So that's been very challenging, or requires a lot of patience, just because you want to make sure that your translation is as accurate as possible, but there's also, you can only do it so many times. And so there's just been a lot of discussion around that. And then also with Neil talking about like reading of instructions. So he showed some screenshots, but there are a lot of words on the screen because it's important that people understand how to play the game, because if they don't understand how to play it, then you're not actually measuring what you're supposed to be measuring. But a lot of times people don't read it. They just want it to like, okay, just let me get to the game. So it's kind of trying to figure out the balance within that, and it definitely wasn't something that I would have thought would have been taking up so much of our time when we first started it, so.
Yeah, that last comment almost makes me wonder if it would be helpful to like gamify the instructions even. You know how like some apps you get where you have to like do the tutorial before you can like play the game, like something like that. I wonder.
Yeah, so right now how we have it, I guess to give more like info, is we have the written instructions, and then we do have like a trial. So kind of what you're talking about, actually like playing through it to make sure that they get it, but it's really just a couple of rounds, and that's when they can ask the research assistant questions, and then they go into actually playing the game. So that is a good point. Maybe there's a way to like combine those. But yeah, it's been a learning adventure. It's also really hard to make a website/app, so that was another thing that we learned. It requires expertise that I definitely don't have. So yeah, we've learned a lot through that. And
Yeah,
the students have also been a big part of this team, so in Tanzania, so they've been really helpful. And they've been attending our class this year, which has been great. So they've been doing some of the analysis, and they will be doing some of the data collection once we have our certificate there. So, yeah. And one more plug, anybody that is in Durham and wants to do some data collection, we are currently doing data collection for the general population in Durham. So anybody that's interested, we would really appreciate it. It takes like 30 to 40 minutes, so it is a chunk of time, but yeah, we need data.
that's, and is that something that can be self-administered, that you can share a link and we do it online, or you have to sit at your side and do the consent and stuff?
No, so we can't do it online because, as Neil was saying, I mean, hopefully you guys would be able to follow the instructions, but people are not following instructions, or we're not giving clear enough instructions. It's all about like linking the person that does their red cap surveys and then the AUBPT. So we're pausing online data collection right now and just doing like research assistant administered data collection. So we do have to sign up. We unfortunately can't just send you guys a link because that would be much easier, but yeah, until we start that out.
Yes. Yeah, I'm pharmacologist, so I was trying to correlate this one with aversion therapy, disulfiram. Those who knows their problem, colleagues, but if they want to solve their problem, they can play the game, but those who do not, then they don't want.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you solve that issue? Because like in pharmacology, there's a drug called, which used to be used to treat alcoholism, that exacerbates alcohol side effect, but those who know the side effects, they won't take it.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
the same with this one. So how do you advance that issue? I mean,
Yeah, so this is very preliminary right now, so I'll do that. But ideally, we want to use this just to like screen people to see, so not necessarily that they have alcohol use disorder to begin with.
Okay.
And the games are very much unrelated to alcohol use. So hopefully they wouldn't know that, oh, this is me saying I have this behavior and therefore they're gonna know that I use alcohol. It's supposed to be more so risky behavior.
Yeah, that's a really, really important point that I would want to highlight more clearly, Neil and Paige, when you do these kinds of presentations about kind of why this approach is useful, because we hear endlessly from reviewers of papers and grants that, and we know that alcohol use behavior is something that has this bias in data collection. So it's hard to assess the risk in a really objective way. But this is one reason why we're doing this, is because it's meant to get at some of these latent constructs in a way that is going to reduce that, like social desirability and other biases that are going to influence the outcome measurement. So that's really important to highlight when you talk about why we're doing AUBPT, and make that really clear.
And right now, people probably would figure it out because we have to do the red cap survey, so we're doing an audit, like we have a lot of like and drink. So it would, if you were a little bit more familiar, it'd be like, oh wow, there's a lot of questions about alcohol use, and then we ask them to play the games. But eventually, once we have it validated, they would only play the games. And as Ashley's saying, it wouldn't require the research assistant to say like, so how many drinks have you had? So it wouldn't be like the stigma around it ideally would be reduced. And the games include, I mean, Neil could talk a little bit more about them, but one of them, for example, is there's arrows up on a screen, and whichever one goes green, you have to press that side. So they do a bunch of rounds of that. Another one is a money selection. So it's talking about like if you want $100 today or $100 in a week, and the participant gets to select which one they would prefer, and the time and the amount of money changes. And then the last one is the balloon analog risk task, which is about putting pumps of air into a balloon, and the participant can either keep putting pumps of air into the balloon until it pops, or they can cash out, so they get like a money reward if the balloon doesn't pop. So again, it's just like how risky is the participant? So those are the three that we have right now. Yeah, but very good question and something that we're trying to overcome, especially with the different populations and just the stigma with alcohol differing in those different countries. So trying to figure out something that could be used across settings. Any other questions?
Maybe some technical question also about the app. If there is offline application, that's really good, but in some LMICs, they have internet package only for specific, like for Facebook, Telegram, WhatsApp, something like that. So if once they download it, if they are not connecting back, then you won't get the data. Then
Yes, no, that's a good point. So right now, we call it an app, but it's really just a web page. So you can go onto it. But we did have an internet problem, so we now have a little icon that goes red if you lose internet connection, but it'll go green when you have internet, because we had that issue where data wasn't syncing because they were losing internet while they were playing the game. But we've been able to fix it so that you can still play the games offline, but you can't exit the web page until you've reconnected, and you have to wait a minute, and then the data will sync, and then you can exit. So hypothetically, we could do the data collection without internet, but then we just have to come back before we exit the web page and allow it to sync. So that's what we came up with for now, but yeah.
Yeah, and that goes to a point that it seems like we've learned over and over again in global health research on a number of different topics. It's especially true when we're dealing with technology, but much like Paige said about language translation, we can have something translated and collect data on hundreds of participants, and then we realize, oh, actually, this translation's not very good. Somebody points out that we need to make some change. And it could be the same thing with these technology or these like connectivity things, why it's so important to do a lot of like pilot testing, because that's kind of what happens in the case that Paige was describing, is that, we've tested the technology, we put it in the setting, seems to be working okay, and then until it's not. And you don't want it to be when you have real important data that you're trying to use for your validation or whatever it might be, or God forbid your like trial, that you've lost because of some of these kinks that you have to get over in the time. So it's always worth putting this groundwork in that's been going on now for years, but it's going to make it better in the end.
And I guess one other thing, if anybody just wants to see the webpage but doesn't want to do data collection, you can also just see the webpage. So we're happy to share the link, and we are always open for feedback, even if it's obviously not true data collection for the study, but we're welcome for any types of observations that you guys have when you take a look at it.
You could just go to Costco while people are waiting in
That's
line and letting people play games.
Yeah, that is true. Just need their attention. That's the only unfortunate thing right now, like it is like 30 to 40 minutes, which we realize is a big ask because we have to do so many of the scales as well. But we can't validate it without having the scales. So that's where we're at right now, but we'll see.
How many do you need to validate?
So we collect a lot. I think it's 7 to 8 scales that we have right now, like through REDCap, which just takes time. And then the other issue is like participant fatigue. So we do the scales first on REDCap and then they play AUBPT. So and it really depends on who you ask. Like some participants are like, oh, it's fine. And then other people, which we found out online, really thought it was way too much.
Yeah.
We got some harsh feedback, which is fine, but, yeah. so
How many
it's just-
people do you need?
So for the general population, we're aiming for 250 people.
Okay,
Yeah.
a little chunk.
Yeah, and we're just starting, so, yeah.
What's your inclusion, exclusion criteria?
So for the general population, just older than 18 right now, and then having had alcohol within the last year. Yeah. And we know that the drinking age is 21 here in the US, but the cutoff is 18 for the study. Yeah. So the other thing too, if you guys have any good ideas is like populations of people that we could ask or like different research groups that you guys are involved in, please do let us know because we are trying to get the 250. So.
Yeah.
I think it's good. They app, if like, I don't know, I'm not IT person, but some app consume like they can work with a very weak network also with weak signals. So if that can be adapted in that way, then that would be
Yeah, that's a
easier.
good point. I'll ask. I don't know either.
There are
That's a
some
good
apps,
point.
I don't know how they do it, but they work even with weak signal.
Yeah.
They manage to connect people, so.
No, that's a good point. I will ask.
Yeah.
All right, so let's thank Neil for that great presentation and Paige and others for answering our questions. Thanks so much. Before we go to our papers, any